In this video, I'm going to show how to use the Google Sheets workbook to submit your measurement data for an application submission, certification submission. This would be used in the case that you cannot submit your measurement data, you can't submit your application through the online system because of the way that you measured the course. If you did not measure the course in continuous measurements from start to finish or finish to start, then you cannot submit it using the online system. This might be the case if you measured the course in segments, separate segments with separate measurements. So this Google Sheet, which you would use to submit your data in that case, starts out with an instruction sheet, and there are a long list of instructions there, and then at the bottom there are 3 examples where the data is filled in for these 3 different courses, and we're going to use one of these as the example to show how to submit your data today. So again, in this spreadsheet, the first sheet, this is our example, and we have in the instructions here. The first thing you would go to down at the bottom is the certification application. And this is where you would input all of the information about your course, just like you do on the PDF version of the application. Throughout the spreadsheet, the white background of a cell means that you can input data into that cell. If it has a background other than white, it means that you won't be permitted to type into that cell. As an example, we can select one with a gray over here. If I try to type into that, it tells me that that cell is protected. The exception to this is on this certification application sheet, the entire column B you can type in. The reason that was done is because you might have a couple of courses. In this example, say you have a 5K and a 10K, where most of the information is going to be the same on this sheet that you're going to enter. So you would just enter it once, and then you could copy and paste the entire B column to your other application for the 10K, and then go in and change the small number of things that you would have to change for that course. So after you finish with the certification application, the next step would be to go to calibration input. It's pretty straightforward here. I won't spend a lot of time, but you enter your numbers, and again, only typing in the white sections. You won't be able to type in the cells with a different background. Those are calculation cells. There are a number of tabs, 6 of them to be exact, for entering calibration data. So if you each set of calibration data that you have for your course, pre and post cals, you would enter in a separate tab. After you finish entering your calibration data, you would go to the segment data. And let me show as our example the map of the course that I've entered here. The way that I measured this course was that I started at the start line down here and measured all the way out to the turnaround. I spun my bike around at that point and then measured all the way back to the start line. Then I went to the finish line, measured all the way out to the turnaround, spun my bike around, rode all the way back to the finish line. So those are my 2 segments, from start to turnaround and from turnaround to finish, or finish to turnaround. So getting back to the spreadsheet, for segment A, this is going to be my segment start to turnaround. I select add for this. The other option is to select subtract. After you put in all of your data and it calculates the length of this segment, if you select subtract, that length will show up as a negative sign, as a negative value up here. And I'll explain later how that would be used. So put your times, your temperatures, and then you select a calibration number, so where you input your calibration data. So we only have one calibration for this course, so we select calibration 1, and it shows the calibration constants over here. You can choose maximum or average of the pre and post calibrations to get your actual calibration that you're going to be using. And then down below is where you input your actual measurement data, including the counts for any intermediate points you have. In this measurement, I only had one intermediate point between the start and the turnaround. That was the 1 mile. So you can see that I only have 3 rows filled in here. The way that it calculates this total count for the segment is that it subtracts the first count that you show, which it assumes is your starting count, from the last number that appears in this column, which it assumes is the final count. So your last number doesn't have to appear in the last cell. It can appear in any of the cells. It will use the number, the last number that it finds in that column as the final count of that segment. So after you finish with the first measurement, you do the second measurement. And one thing I wanted to point out here is that sometimes on your Excel spreadsheet that you're using out on the course, you might put your starting count on the bottom, and then, so in the example of mine where I spun the bike around, I might have the turnaround down here, and that would actually be the start of the second measurement, and the finish would be up here. That's okay, because the way that this is calculated is this total counts for the segment. It takes the absolute value of the difference between the last number it finds and the first number it finds. So if that turns out to be negative, it'll change it to a positive. So after we finish with that segment input, we then move on to the finish to turnaround segment. We enter the data in a similar way for that segment. It's also an add because it's going to be added to the course. Then we move on, after we entered information for all of our segments, to the course length calculation. And all you do in this course length calculation is to enter the segments in the order that they appear on the course. This isn't necessarily the order that you measured them, but you do want to put it in the order that they appear on the course. So the first segment is segment A. That's what I selected. And it will show that this is the start to turnaround here. And then the second one was segment B, which was the finish to turnaround or turnaround to finish. And then it shows the distance of those two. And here's where if you had put a negative sign, selected subtract rather than add, it would actually show this as a negative distance. And where this might be used, for example, is when you're doing an adjustment to an existing certified course where you have a segment that you're replacing. So the original course, the measurement of the original course segment would show up as a negative here because you selected subtract, and then the new segment, new path for that segment would show up as a positive. So you'd be subtracting the old one, adding the new one as part of your adjustment. So after you put in your segments of your course, then you go down here to the desired length. There's a pull-down menu for standard lengths of courses. You can also choose other, and if you choose other, then you put a value in here for the odd distance that you might have that this race course is going to be. It does a tolerance check to make sure that you are within that 0.08%. Your two measurements are within that tolerance. And then it shows you the length of your course, the sum of those two segments, which in my case ended up being about 24 meters or 80 feet long. And it tells you that you need to adjust it. You need to subtract 24 meters from the length of the course, or 80 feet. And then finally, the last input that you make is that you explain how you adjusted the course here. And I show that I moved the turnaround south by 40 feet, which is closer to the finish, and will shorten the course by 80 feet. And that is pretty much it for inputting your course data.